some of the problems that we'll end up seeing here. And the first one, it talks about us just solving a two-step equation. And so what we're going to end up doing is doing opposite operations. So this is a positive 17, so I need to subtract 17 from both sides. So the key is remembering that I'm taking more away than what I started with, so that makes a negative number. So 1 minus 17 makes negative 16. And I have to make sure I bring down all the components, including this negative sign here. So I'm going to divide by negative 4, and when I do that, I'm left with k equals positive 4. So that was a 4 that I divided by, not 9, so let's fix that a little bit. So taking a look at our next one here, I have to use the distributive property and multiply negative 3 over that sum. So I end up with a negative 6n minus 3 plus 7 equals negative 5. So I'm collecting like terms. So these two terms right here combine together to make a positive 4. And so now I'm left with negative 6n plus 4 equals negative 5. So I can go ahead and subtract the 4 from both sides, and so when I do that, I end up having the same sign, so I end up adding those two numbers and I get negative 9. And when I divide by negative 6, I end up with a fraction, and so all I do is reduce the fraction by taking out the common factor. Now the negative signs will cancel, and so my answer is 3/2. If you wrote the answer as 1.5 or 1 1/2, I would take any of these answers here. So in this next problem, it says to do a few things here. We have to first find x, and then find the value of x, then find the angle measures of each polygon. So it'll tell us the sum of the angles of the polygon. In this case, we have a triangle which the angles sum or measure sum to 180 degrees. So I'm going to take all the different angles I have. I have x, I have 65, I have x minus 5, and I add all those together. So x minus 5, not plus 5 there. So x minus 5 equals 180. Now that will change depending on the type of figure you have, but it will tell us the sum of the angle measures. And so in this case, I combine like terms. I've got 1x and 1x. Those add together to make 2x. 65 minus 5, that makes 60. And this all equals 180. So I do some opposite operations. I'm going to add 60 to both sides, and that gives me 240 equals 2x. So when I divide by 2, I get x equals 120. So I found the value of x, and so now I end up having to solve for the missing variables. And just by looking at this, something looks a little bit off here. So what looks off is that I have an angle that looks a lot smaller than 120 degrees. So I'm thinking I made an error in here, and so let's see if I can go back and find it. And so where I end up seeing it is right here. So when I did positive 65 minus 5, I put a negative 60. So I need to change that, and that's going to end up changing it to a positive 60. So let's go ahead and fix that right now. So it's going to be a positive 60, so I'm going to end up having to subtract rather than add, and that's going to give me 120. So I'm going to still divide by 2, but now I end up getting 60, and that looks a lot better. So something to always look for, check to make sure your answer kind of makes sense. And looking at this triangle, it's a acute triangle, and I had an obtuse angle, so I knew I had done something wrong. So now let's find the angle measures. I know this one is 60 degrees because it's just x. This one over here, I have to do 60 minus 5 to make 55 degrees. The other angle is given to me right here at 65 degrees. So let's move on to the other problems, and here we see a pasture, and it's got a 155 foot fence enclosing the pasture. What is the length of each side of the pasture? So all we're going to do is add up all these different sides, and it tells us that the sum of the sides is 455. So I've got x plus 3x plus 1.5x plus 180 equals 455. So from this point, I can go ahead and combine some like terms, and I see I have 1x and 4x, or 1x and 3x, and 1.5x makes 5.5x. And then I can go ahead and subtract this 180 at the same time. So I'll subtract the 180, and that will give me, having to borrow a little bit here, gives me 275. And so from this point, I can go ahead and divide by the 5 and 5/10. Now when you do that, you've got to move the divisor's decimal over one space and add a 0. So really off to the side, you're doing 55 into 2,750. Well, 55 does not go into 2, does not go into 27, but does go into 275. And it ends up going in there 5 times. And so that makes exactly 275. So we still have this extra 0, so we have to bring that 0 in the quotient up. So x is 50. So that's the value of x, and it says what is the length of each side of the pasture. So we found x. Now to find the length of each side, well, this one's just x, so this one's going to be 50 feet. And this one is 3 times x, so that's going to be 3 times 50 is 150 feet. And then the last one, 1.5 times x, gives us 75 feet. So looking at this last one here, it says that use the table to write and solve. So we have to write and solve an equation to find the number of points you need in the 4th game so that the mean, which is the average number, is 20. So I'm going to say that P equals the points in game 4. So I always like to be able to define my variable so I understand what it means. Now this word right here, the mean number, the mean means the average. So what you do to find the average is you take the numbers 25, 15, and 18, and P, we don't know what that one is. We're just going to use that variable there and divide by the number of numbers. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 games. So that's why I'm dividing by 4. And I want the average to be this. Is means equal. So I want it to equal 20. So to solve this, I've written the equation. Now to solve, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to do some opposite operations. I'm going to, this is division of 4, so I'm going to multiply by 4 to cancel out the 4s. Do the same thing on this other side. And so what that gives me is, it gives me 25 plus 15 plus the 18 plus P equals 80. So now it's just a matter of counting up what all these numbers add to make. And so this makes 40 plus 18 gives me 58 plus P equals 80. And so I'm going to subtract the 58 from both sides. Make sure you borrow. And that gives us 22. So 22 points. Make sure you have units with every number, especially if it's a word problem. So that's what I need on the 4th game. So those are the types of problems that you're going to end up seeing on the homework. Good luck.